Hello, I'm continuing my reviews on the Gamera series with Gamera vs. Jiger, which I have on the same DVD as Gamera vs. Giron, which was the previous entry in the series. Now, I got this DVD long before I ended up getting this DVD set from Mill Creek called the Gamera Legacy Collection, which contains all the Gamera films with the exception of 2006's Gamera the Brave. Now, Gamera vs. Jiger was released in 1970, and this is the sixth film in the Gamera franchise. Now, plot-wise, Gamera vs. Jiger seems to take a lot from the previous two Gamera films, where the main characters are once again these two boys, one Japanese and one Caucasian. And that's one thing you'll notice if you watch these movies in a row. Basically, both this and the previous film, Gamera vs. Giron, are basically loose remakes of Gamera vs. Varis. However, both films are significantly better than Gamera vs. Varis. But this movie also seems to take a lot from Gamera vs. Barugon, which was the second Gamera film, because Jiger is actually a very similar creature to Barugon, especially the implication that there's something mystical or supernatural going on. So, the plot of Gamera vs. Jiger is it revolves around Expo 70, which was a real science expo going on in Japan at the time. But in the film, you have this archaeologist who happens to be the father of one of the two main boys who's in Africa digging out this statue called the Devil's Whistle. But Gamera comes and tries to stop this excavation, and only the children seem to understand that Gamera is there for a good purpose. But ultimately, they end up removing this statue, and this ends up releasing a giant monster dubbed Jiger, which follows them to Japan, and Gamera tries to stop it, but Jiger ends up stinging Gamera with his tail, and you find out that this has basically impregnated Gamera with Jiger's seed. So the two main boys, Hiroshi and Tommy, end up stealing this submersible designed by Hiroshi's father, and they literally travel into Gamera's body to try to rid Gamera of the baby Jigers that are now inhabiting his body. So eventually they do save Gamera, and Gamera ends up kicking the shit out of Jiger. That's the basic plot of this movie. Now, Gamera vs. Jiger is a well-made film. I actually think it's more well-made than the previous two Gamera films, so it seems like this was an attempt to go back to the quality of the first three Gamera films. At the same time, I found Gamera vs. Giron to be a much more fun film. I think because this takes itself slightly more seriously than the previous two films, that actually makes this one kind of boring in my opinion. Not that you can't do a serious Gamera film, because Gamera vs. Barugon was serious, and that's actually the best of the Showa era. And of course you have the 90s Gamera series, which shows that you really can take Gamera seriously, but those are significantly better movies than this, and I'm not saying this one really takes itself that seriously, it just takes itself slightly more seriously than the previous two films. But you still have a lot of goofy shit in this movie. Like, there's a scene in this movie where Gamera has to plug up his ears, and he uses these two telephone poles to do it. And of course you have the whole thing of the kids being the smart ones and the adults being complete dumbasses, which is a trope that plagues the entire Gamera series. Now, that being said, I think Jiger is an interesting kaiju, and I liked the implication that there's something supernatural going on, like the fact that the statue that was keeping him underground was called the Devil's Whistle. Like, there's almost the implication that perhaps Jiger is actually an incarnation of the devil himself, or perhaps some kind of a demon. There's also sort of a theme in the movie about the adults not really trusting Gamera at first, but then learning to believe in Gamera. It's sort of a theme that's just briefly touched on, and it's not really done that well in the movie, but I guess I appreciate the effort. Now, the idea of Jiger implanting his seed inside Gamera is actually kind of a creepy idea when you stop to think about it, but I kind of wish they did more with the whole sequence of Hiroshi and Tommy going inside Gamera's body, because they make it look like it's more of just a cave, and I wish there was more of an effort to actually make this look like they're literally inside a living, breathing creature. But yeah, Gamera vs. Jiger, it's a well-made monster movie, but ultimately, in my opinion, it's kind of forgettable. So that was my review on Gamera vs. Jiger, and bye.